Howdy, and welcome to episode 49 of T-Shirts and Shawls. I'm Karen, and today is Thursday, February 22nd, 2018. And I just want to apologize up front. My voice probably sounds a little bit off today. I have had this persistent cough, no other symptoms, just a persistent cough all week, and it has been affecting my voice, but I should be able to make it through today's episode. We'll go ahead and get started. So the shirt I'm wearing today is one that I just got recently, so I wanted to show it off because I think it's super cute. So it's a dragon in the rain protecting the little kitty from getting wet. So I just really liked this shirt. Dragons, kitties. It was just kind of one of those, oh, I really need to have it. Speaking of cats, guess who's here? Wally says hi. Anyway, but so I really wanted to get this shirt, and the reason I picked today to wear it is because of the rain. Oh my gosh, it has been raining seemingly almost non-stop for a couple of days here. Here is the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. So yeah, it's been just rain, rain, rain. We actually started to get nicer weather. The temperatures were going up. I actually wore shorts for a little bit. I think on either Sunday or Monday. And then the temperature just plummeted and the rain started, and it's been crazy. It's been enough above freezing that we're not getting snow or ice, thankfully, with the ice especially. But yeah, it's been raining. I have no idea if you can hear it in the background. It's still going on. So my yarn has been taking forever to dry. I've got yarn that's been on the drying rack for several days. Usually it dries overnight. It just feels slightly damp to the touch, and I can't tell if it's just a little bit cold or if it is actually got a little bit of water, because wool will absorb water moisture from the air. So I'm leaving it on the drying rack just to make absolutely sure it is dry before I twist it up into a skein and put a label on it and go put it away in a box. I want to make sure that it's safe. And anyway, so just crazy. And I can hear the rain has really picked up even just now. So this morning when I was dropping Luke off at school, usually we walk to school, but in the mornings, especially if it's been cold, I drive. And instead of dropping him off in the drop-off line, I actually park in the parking lot and walk him to the door. It's so cute. I ask him, do you want me to drop you off or walk you in? And he every morning says, walk me in because I want to give you a hug and a kiss. Just melts my heart every morning. I'm like, okay, I will go park and walk you to the door because I definitely like our little hug and kiss. Anyway, so we parked in the parking lot, and that is when the skies just unloaded, and it was just a really, really heavy downfall. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe if we just kind of sit in the car for a couple of minutes, it'll lighten up, because the rain here does that pretty frequently. 1 minute it'll be just pouring, and then the next minute it'll be much lighter or even stop. So we waited, and it was just still going heavy. So I thought, okay, I really don't want him to go into school with wet clothes, and especially with wet shoes. So I thought, all right, I'm going straight home, so it doesn't really matter if I'm getting wet. So I actually carried him in, which, you know, he's 6 now. He weighs a lot more, so he's pretty heavy. It's harder to carry. So I had an umbrella in one hand, and I had Luke in the other arm, and I was basically barely keeping his feet above, because he's also really tall, barely keeping his feet above the parking lot and the sidewalk, so that way his shoes and socks would stay dry, so he wouldn't have to go into school with super wet feet and socks, which is what happened to me. But like I said, I just got to jump back in the car, drive 2 minutes to home, and then I could take off those wet shoes and socks. But yeah, my shoes and socks were absolutely drenched, so definitely worth it. So kind of like the little dragon, protecting the little kitty, I tried my best to keep Luke dry so he could go into school and not have wet, soggy feet all day. He does have a pair of socks in his locker that he could change into, but I mean, even if you get dry socks, if your shoes are, like my shoes were absolutely soaked. If your shoes are absolutely soaked, even if you put on dry socks, those dry socks are not going to stay dry for very long. So anyway, so I carried Luke into to the front door this morning, protecting him like the dragon protects the cat. You guys, I am so excited. Guess what I have? Ta-da-da! A finished shawl. This is the wrong side of, flip it around. This is the Beauty and the Beast shawl that I started working on last July that I finally finished. So there it is in all its glory. So I started the shawl. It actually was meant to be a shawl for the knit-along, for our knit-along, when it was the fairy tales theme. And I didn't finish it in time for the knit-along, and it just, the project dragged on, and hey, Eva is making an appearance. Let's not make that close of an appearance, though. Here's Eva. I don't think you guys have seen her for a while. So I'm going to put her down so she doesn't go right in front of the camera. Anyway, so this had been on my needles forever and just dragging and dragging and dragging. And I finally decided enough is enough. I need to just get through this. I told you guys last time that I was just kind of bored with the project and I didn't know what was keeping me from doing it. So I decided this is what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to concentrate on it. I am going to finish it. And I did. Yay! I didn't work on very much else, so I am in the what I'm knitting section. I don't have a whole lot to share there, but this is done. So I started thinking about it. You know, why did this shawl stay on my needles for so long? Why did I find it boring? Why did I not want to work on it? And so this is what I finally came up with. First of all, so it starts down here where you cast on these stitches and you knit going up and you start increasing on this side. And you guys, I hate knitting scarves because it's usually just, you know, straight. You do the same thing over and over and over again and it just gets boring and monotonous. And although there were some increases over here on this side, at the beginning, this just felt like a scarf to me and I just really didn't want to do it. And then since I was kind of dragging already, when the knit-along finished, so that quarter for the knit-along finished and this wasn't done, I also kind of lost some of the motivation to work on this. Since it was supposed to be for the knit-along and it was not going to get finished during that quarter for the knit-along, why bother working on it so much? And so I think I kind of got it into my head, this is a boring project. It's really not. This is a boring project. I'm not going to finish it in time for the knit-along. Why bother? So that's what I got stuck in my head. So every time I looked in my knitting basket and thought about what am I going to knit right now, I would look at the bag that this was in, and those are the thoughts that would run through my head. And I wouldn't pick it up. But this project is far from boring. Yeah, okay, so it starts off a little bit narrow, and you do there's a little bit of monotony with the cables here, but then you start building this section, and this is a fun section to knit. And then over on this side, you're basically creating an I-cord. So when you knit on the right side, you would knit those 3 stitches on the end, and then when you flipped it to work the wrong side, you slipped those stitches. So it basically pulls it around and creates an I-cord edge. That's interesting. The cables themselves are interesting. Definitely practice, especially if you want to work cables without a cable needle. Great practice for that. And so that was interesting. You had to continue working this section until you used 45% of your yarn. So I definitely did math, calculations. You're having a scale that can weigh your yarn in grams is really helpful for that. So figuring out when I get to that point. Then once you do that, and I showed you guys last time where I just started, you're basically doing a knitted on border where you turn the work and now you start working this way and connecting the new side with the border edges. Plus, this also adds some increases to that knitted on border to create this section. So the shaping of the shawl is really interesting. So ultimately it works out to a long triangle. I need to be able to step back further if I could to show you the shape. But you're basically creating a long triangle, but you're knitting it going and this way. So the shaping of it is really ingenious. The designer did a really great job with the shaping. So it's really interesting to do that, to be doing these increases, doing this completely different stitch pattern over here, a completely different cable up here, and then look what's going on there. A picot edge. This is not a bind off, this is the edge. So every time, so as you're working to this edge, every time you get to this edge, every other right side row, you would cast on 2 stitches and immediately bind them off and create these little picots. So you've got an I-cord on one side, a picot on another side, you've got cables, you've got increases, you've got interesting shaping. This shawl is full of interesting stuff. So I have no idea, because I just had it stuck in my head at the beginning. This is a little bit boring because it starts off a little bit boring and then it gets interesting. But because it started off a little bit boring, I just let that thought get into my head. And so finally, when I made that thought go away, or I just like overrode that thought, that's when it finally, I pushed through. And remember guys, last time, 2 weeks ago, I was like, so I'd done this whole part and maybe like this far along on this edge. So I did this whole edge, half the shawl, in less than 2 weeks. Whereas it took me over 6 months to do the first half. Crazy, crazy. But it's finished, it's done. I really like it. It is out of my Legend base, which is a blend of merino, yak, and nylon. So I'm planning to bring it to DFW Fiber Fest and the other festivals that I will be going to this year and show it off as a sample. So that way, especially when people are like, why do the colors on this yarn look a lot darker or look different? I can say, well, this is how the yarn starts. This is the base color, undyed. Whereas most yarn is a off-white or cream color. So it just takes to dye differently. So I'm really excited to be able to share this year in my booth. So the pattern is the Beauty and the Beast shawl by Very Busy Monkey, and that's all one word, Very Busy Monkey. And like I said, it is not boring. There are lots of things that are going on in this shawl, really, really ingenious shaping, and it looks fabulous, and it has several different sections. So don't let my long time on this project fool you. I really do recommend this pattern and think that it was ultimately a really fun knit. What I've finished, I have a finished sock, so I was close to finished, I think, on this last time. So this is my new rainbow self-striping colorway called Joyous Guard, which I do still have some skeins available in the shop right now if you are interested in it. And since I finished this sock, I had been working on socks, all the socks. And I really haven't touched any socks in the past 2 weeks. I think a large part of that is because I was finishing that Beauty and the Beast shawl, so that was my focus project. But I think I also just got slightly burned out on socks, and I really haven't done much else after I finished this sock. Still lots of socks to knit, and I do enjoy socks. Like I said, it's a really great travel project to take with you, but I think I just needed a small break from socks, and now I think I'm ready to get back into it. So I did finish that. The other thing that I wanted to finish was I wanted to do like a quick project, a hat or a cowl or something that I could kind of start and finish in a couple of days, if not even in an evening or two, just so I could get a finished project under my belt, because it had felt like forever since I had a finished project. And I thought about that, and I actually had picked out yarn and picked out a pattern, and I was going to cast on, and then that Into the Wool fiber retreat that I'm going to in September to kind of help out with people getting to know each other before the retreat, which I think is a really, really fabulous idea. There are going to be some knit-alongs and crochet-alongs that go along between now and September in the retreat. So like I said, fabulous idea, so everyone can kind of get to know each other online, so when we get there we already feel like we know one another. So anyway, so the first one is going to kick off March 1st, and the theme is to use yarn or a project bag or notions or a pattern or something that a friend has given you, or that you've purchased from a friend. I think that's kind of the thing. So the yarn that I had picked that I wanted to do, I'm pretty sure it's a cow. Yeah, I think it's a cow. The yarn that I had picked that I wanted to do is yarn that a friend gave to me. And so I decided that it would be perfect for this knit along, and March 1st isn't that far away, so I decided to wait on that project and to do that as part of the knit along. So I will show you guys that next time, because March 1st will come between now and the next recording, and I will be able to tell you guys all about that. And so that's why I don't have a small other project finished. Plus like I said, I finally got into the groove of that Beauty and the Beast shawl, so I didn't need that small project to kind of help get me into the kind of back into feeling able to get to that project. So I do have something planned, and I'm just going to save it for the Into the Wool Fiber Retreat knit along, which seems like lots of fun. So since I spent a lot of time the past 2 weeks working on that Beauty and the Beast shawl, I don't have a lot of progress on other projects. I have not touched my Let Go cardigan, although one of my goals this week is to work at least 6 rows on the cardigan, and I still have not done a single row, so I do need to pick that up. And I have not really worked on the socks with the yarn from Brazen Stitchery. So really, my projects that I've worked on are only 2 other projects. So the first one is my Free or Fade shawl. Let the glare of the light pass away. So my Free or Fade shawl, which is the shawl that I'm working on for the current quarter knit along for the podcast. And this is one that uses, you can use as many colors as you want, but this one, as written, calls for 3 colors. And if you've watched the podcast, I've been telling you that I'm not sure yet what the 3rd color is going to be. I hadn't picked it out. I thought that I wanted to knit more on the 2nd color to really see what kinds of colors come out with this speckled yarn and what I might want to do for the 3rd color. And I've, auditioned several different yarns thinking about colors that I want to add in for the 3rd color. And I've realized, I really like the green with this. And so I started thinking about another, doing a different green, maybe going a little bit darker, maybe going, actually I think this was the lightest green that I have in my stash. So if I wanted to go lighter, I'd have to go buy some new yarn. Oh darn. But I started thinking about it, and I'm like, I really, really like the way the green and the speckled yarn work together. I still have half a skein of this green yarn left. Why don't I just use it as the 3rd color? And according to the pattern, for the 1st color, you need 200 yards, and for both the 2nd and 3rd color, you need 400 yards. And sure enough, weighing my yarn, this green, there was about 400 yards in the skein, and I have 51 grams left, so I pretty much used spot on 200 yards for this first part. So I probably really would need 400 yards for the last part. So what I'm going to do is I've been starting to, and the light really does not like the light color, it's just washing this out. So I'm starting to weigh my yarn as I work each pair of rows to see how much yarn each row takes. So that way I can tell how much of my green yarn I could use on the end. So my plan right now is to knit a little bit extra of the middle section before I start the 3rd color. So I think right now I am 1.5, a little less than half, repeats away from where the pattern says to go into the next color, but I'm probably going to knit another 1, maybe 2 repeats, again, depending on the math, what the math says, before I start the 3rd color. And so the 3rd color will actually be the 1st color, just kind of coming back around to that color. And if I happen to run out I'm not going to be sad if I have to go back to this yarn for the end. It does end in a picot bind off, which I know is going to use a lot of yarn. So I actually thought maybe it would be kind of fun to have the end be this color again and do the picot bind off in this color. So I'm just going to kind of play it by ear based upon how much yarn that I have. Again, having a scale that measures in grams so I can really see how much yarn each row is taking will help me be able to figure out exactly where to make those changes, and whether or not I'll need to come back to the speckled yarn at the end. But that's my plan, and I think that I'm pretty happy with that plan, and we'll see how that goes. And since that is the my kind of entry for this first quarter knit along, I need to have it finished by the end of March. So that's kind of been the project that I guess I am now kind of turning my focus toward, since it does have a deadline. But I couldn't help myself starting another project. So I have a friend who is knitting a boxy. So boxy is a pattern by Joji Locatelli, which I guess maybe, I mean, my Let Go cardigan is also a Joji pattern. So maybe my goal is to knit 3 garments this year, so maybe I should just look at her patterns and pick another one, because apparently I like doing patterns that she's designed. Anyway, boxy is a very oversized sweater, pullover. So fingering weight yarn, like basically no shaping in the body, just, I mean, boxy, it's a big box, but it is meant to have a lot of positive ease. And then your sleeves at the elbow, the sleeves actually become kind of tight. Not like tight, but definitely fitted, I guess should be the word, rather than the oversized thing. So that's kind of where some of the shaping and the sizing comes into play. And I have seen so many people make this sweater, and they say it's one of their favorite things that they've made, because it is so comfortable, and they love just being able, if around the house they get a little cold, just throwing it on and kind of cuddling up in it. And I've heard of people making multiple boxies because they love it so much. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna jump on the boxy bandwagon. I'm gonna knit a boxy also. And I looked at my stash, because I have lots of sweater quantities in my stash, or at least for me, lots, because the rate I knit sweaters, I should have sweater quantities for several years. Anyway, so I looked at my stash, and the pattern was designed for Tosh Merino Light, so Madeline Tosh, and I actually happen to have some Tosh Merino Light, exactly the yardage that I needed, and so I decided that is what I am going to make my boxy out of. And I'm here kind of straightening this out because I'm not very far along, and my cable on my circular needles is just really wonky, and so I'm trying to make it not be so wonky. All right, so like I said, I've only just started. I haven't done much on it yet, but it is a lightly variegated yarn, purples and blues, so there's not a lot of color contrast in there, which is the way I like variegated yarn. So that is what it looks like. And like I said, I haven't gotten very far along on it. Basically do a few rows of ribbing, and then it's just stockinette for miles. Feels literally like miles. I think I have something like 14 inches of stockinette. And then because it is oversized, that means a really big circumference. There are 390 stitches on the needle. So I've actually put a fair amount of work into this, and that's how far along I've gotten. I'm not in a rush to get this done. I mean, I would like to get it done probably by the time the weather turns cold again, but I should be able to do that, I hope. But this makes for a really good project to knit while reading, since it's just stockinette on and on and on and on. Really easy to read while working on it. I'm running into a couple of issues, and that really has to do with the cable on my interchangeable needles. So these needles are Diet Craft Darn Pretty needles, which are my very favorite needles in the world. I love them because they are nice and smooth, but also, even though they're super smooth, they're not like yarn falling off smooth. They still have just enough of a grip to it. The join in the interchangeable is completely smooth. You really don't feel it at all. And it's got a swivel action. I don't know if you can actually see that I'm sorry, my nails are purple because I just repurpled my hair yesterday. So I apologize for, it looks like dirty nails. It's purple. So it's got this swivel action here, which can be nice. They're the best needles in the world except for the cable. This cable, which is just this plastic, really nothing special cable. I hate it. I fight with it. The needles themselves are worth it to me to fight with the cable, but in this project it has been even more of a fight than usual, probably because it's such a long cable. This cable, it wants to keep its shape. It wants to be curled up like it was in my case. It does not want to smooth out. I'm hoping once the project itself gets a little bit heavier, then it will, like, I'm able to kind of hold it out now to make it look like it's not really trying to coil back up. So hopefully it will get better as I work with it, but especially working those first few rows, it was kind of miserable having this try to coil back up. So as I just started this, the people who do the Diet Craft needles, they just released different cables. So I know that there have been people who have created their own cables, taken the little connector, and they use a coated, it's a coated metal kind of thing. There's another word I can't remember right now. Anyway, this coated wire, I guess, that they use for the needle. And I've thought about, trying to do that myself. In the forum on Ravelry, people have explained, how to find this coated wire or whatever, and how to make your own. And I've thought about doing that, but I just haven't ever sat down to do it. And apparently now those cables are available. And they were just announced this week, and I went ahead and ordered some in each of the lengths, so that way I can have at least one set of these new coated wire cables, because supposedly they are so much better and they don't tend to try to stay in the shape that they're stored in. And I know there are ways I could hold the cable over some steam or use a hairdryer or something to heat it and to kind of get it to unkink a little bit. But I'm really looking forward to getting these new cables and exchanging this project, putting the new cable on and see how it goes. I'm really looking forward to that. But apparently a lot of people are looking forward to that because they, I think it was Tuesday that they released, Monday or Tuesday that they released these new cables, and she said that the response was a little overwhelming and it's going to take her a few days to sort out all the orders. So a little bit of a shipping delay there, but hopefully I will get them before the next podcast and we'll be able to let you guys know whether or not I'm enjoying them. But there were some good things that happened with this project. So 390 stitches I cast on using the long tail cast on, and I decided to not do any of the tricks that you can do to make your long tail cast on, so that way hopefully you will have the right length, like using both ends of the yarn. I just decided to do a regular long tail cast on. So I estimated some yarn, kind of pulled some out, and was like, that looks good, let's give it just a little extra, just in case. And I cast on 390 stitches. Little tip, use stitch markers every 50 stitches, so that way if you lose count, you only have to count 50 stitches between stitch markers. So I did that and got to the end and I have that much left over. Perfect length for the tail. First try on the 390 stitches long tail cast on. Yay! Hopefully that, aside from the cable issue, hopefully that is a sign that this project will go well. Anyway, and then you've got these 390 stitches, and I've got this wobbly cable, and trying to join it without twisting it. That was also a little bit of a challenge, but I did it, and I checked and checked and checked, and I'm still checking to make sure that it is not twisted, and I appear to have done just fine. It is not twisted. The project is, yep, just double checking, making sure, because I've just always got that fear that maybe it really is twisted, and somehow, even with all the times that I've checked, I've managed to miss that it's twisted. But it appears to be just fine. Which, by the way, that happened to me once. I started this, started a project, and I got actually a little further than this into it, and it wasn't this many stitches. And I looked at it and realized, yeah, I completely twisted it when I joined for the round, and I ripped out that project, and I never started it again. I was so mad. I think I'd gotten like 3 inches into it before I realized it. Anyway, so the project is going well, a little slowly since it is so many stitches. But like I said, a great reading while knitting project. So yeah, that's what is on my needles. So I am still doing lots of dyeing in preparation for DFW Fiber Fest, which is getting closer and closer, faster and faster. So I'm kind of getting to the point where it's, I've got so much more that I need to do and time is running out. But I wanted to show you guys one of the samples that I got, and I wish I back up the camera a little bit more. I should probably do that, because this is a really gorgeous, gorgeous shawl, and oh, just look at that. Look at that. So this gorgeousness, nice big shawl also, is the Rebel 2 shawl from Leslie Ann Robinson, and it is a brioche pattern. So you've got kind of, I guess, regular brioche in the body, and then you've got these really interesting stitch pattern here. So this is one of my sample knitters that did this, and this is something that I would like to practice brioche and be able to get to the point where I can do patterns like this, but I knew that I wasn't ready for this quite yet myself, so I fortunately had a sample knitter that was able to do it, and man, she did a fabulous, fabulous job. So thank you. This is just gorgeous. And she was very nice about offering some tips and suggestions for whenever I do decide to tackle this project on my own. So I've got some nice suggestions for doing things like using stitch markers to keep the so if you haven't done brioche before, basically what you do is you have a regular stitch, and then you kind of have a yarn over that goes with that regular stitch, and the two things together, a stitch plus a yarn over, becomes one kind of brioche stitch. So that yarn over and the regular stitch need to stay together. And I have not yet tried increases and decreases with brioche, but apparently when you start doing that, you can start to lose which yarn over goes with which stitch. And so she recommended using those the stitch markers that you can open and close, that you can, attach them to the two stitches that go together, so you can keep them together and don't get mixed up. So that and a couple of other tips that I've saved for whenever I start doing this type of pattern. So anyway, isn't it just fabulous? Oh my gosh, I love this. And with brioche, the other side, it can also look really nice, but I think this one, especially with the way these little designs are, I think there is more of a right side on this one than typical with some brioche patterns. So the yarns, the kind of wineish color is my Agravane color. This is Camelot, so merino cashmere nylon. So Agravane, and the gray is meant to be Uther. Uther is like really, lightning, I don't know if you saw that, a really, really, really light gray, and because of that, it uses an infinitesimal amount of black dye, and so I dyed this skein by itself. And so, my scale, I have to be very, very careful and not put too much dye in, or else it'll make the gray a little darker. And so I dye this skein by itself, and usually I dye 4, so I can, you know, multiply that little bit of dye by 4, which helps a bit. And so I think this color of Uther is meant to be Uther, is a little darker than Uther usually is, but anyway, so it's somewhere between Uther and Excalibur. But yeah, just gorgeous. Look at that. Oh, so if you're going to be at DFW Fiber Fest or Houston Fiber Fest or the other shows that I'm going to this year, definitely you have to see this in person, because yeah, showing it on camera does not give you the full effect of just how awesome this is. Yeah, and I've got a few more samples that I'm waiting on that I'll show you guys as those come in, but otherwise I am just working as fast as I can to get stuff ready for DFW Fiber Fest, including some more new self-striping colors, so keep your eye out for that. So I just got up to refill my glass of water. I've been wondering why the cats, who seemed so attentive when I started recording today's podcast, had been leaving me alone. Yes, apparently they had grabbed a little cake of a mini skein, so undyed mini skein cake of yarn, and ran off with it, and they were having a good time playing with it. I found it strewn in the kitchen, into the hallway, into the playroom, into the master bedroom. I'm glad it was a mini skein at least, so I couldn't imagine if it had been a full skein. I couldn't imagine how far they might have gotten with it. Ah, crazy! So anyway, I've cleaned up that. The cats now are not quite as happy because their toy has been taken away. Oh my gosh. Okay, anyway, so what I am reading. Basically, I am still reading and I'm still very much enjoying the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I am now into book 5, so about a third of the way through that book. So that has been a really great read, and especially now that I have Boxy on the needles as well as the Free or Fade. Both of those are things that I can read and knit. I'm really able to get a lot more reading done. And one of the other things that I've done is I've been reading a few nonfiction things, and one of them that I actually just finished yesterday is a book called Essentialism. And this book I decided to read because I think I've mentioned before, my word for the year is focus. That I want to focus on what I'm doing, the tasks that are important, and not get distracted by either shiny new object syndrome of, oh, I could do this, and go off and do it, or just, you know, all the things that really aren't as important. So Essentialism is basically a book about that, about both finding the things that are essential and kind of cutting out the things that are not essential. And so at its heart, it's kind of, I guess, in some ways obvious, and yet it's so hard to do in practice, because it's really, really easy to get bogged down in the things that truly aren't that essential when it boils down to it. And even before reading the book, I've made some changes to my schedule, where there were things that I would do, like I would do all the, you know, checking my email, answering email, checking into Facebook, and doing all those things first in the morning. And then as the day went on, if I had time, I would reskein yarn or get self-striping yarn prepared. And more often than not, I would have so much time on the computer, and sometimes I would be doing work, you know, doing some of the editing projects that I have. I would be spending so much time on the computer that I never got around to the yarn related things, and I didn't like dye as much self-striping yarn as I wanted because I just didn't get around to prepping the self-striping yarn. So I've changed that, especially since I really need to dye a lot more self-striping in preparation for DFW Fiber Fest. Now I start with the yarn stuff, and then I do the computer stuff later in the day. And in some ways it's hard because I kind of like being able to respond to posts on Ravelry or Facebook or my email pretty quickly, and now I feel like I'm letting things go without responding right away. But when I say not responding right away, it's maybe taking me 24, maybe 48 hours to respond. And in all honesty, that's not taking forever. So you might have noticed that maybe there have been posts in the in the Ravelry group that maybe I don't respond to right away, like I used to do. And that's because I'm trying to not make computer time be the most essential thing, because I do think that having a discussion and conversation is important. So it is something that gets done. But I have a tendency, once I get on my computer, to check Facebook and to get kind of into that spiral, and just helping myself kind of not get into that. I put off the computer time, so that way I have an end time when it's time to go pick up Luke from school that I have to turn things off, and I don't just waste the whole day checking Facebook, which unfortunately has happened. Anyway, so that also just kind of as a FYI of maybe why I'm not quite as immediately responsive, for instance, in the Ravelry group. Anyway, so there have been lots of things that the book has been talking about and kind of reinforcing some of what I've been doing. But then it came to this section that I've heard of before, this idea that I've heard of before, but it's always just kind of been a kind of a theoretical idea. And this book, for whatever reason, it started to really make a lot more concrete sense to me. And I started thinking about how it applies to our crafting lives. And so I wanted to share it with you guys. So it's this idea of the sunk cost bias. And if you do any reading in economics, especially like behavioral economics, you may have heard this sunk cost bias, because it's a big thing kind of in that field. So basically the idea is that you've already put time or money into something, and you feel that since you've put that time and money into it, then you need to that you've already sunk those costs in, and therefore you need to get that value back from it. And even if you are finding that it is not doing what you want it to do. So that's the idea. Let me give you some things. So I actually took a screenshot, since I'm reading this on my Kindle. I took a screenshot of a page that kind of explains this, that I thought that I would share with you guys. So it says, have you ever continued to invest time or effort in a non-essential project instead of cutting your losses? Have you ever continued to pour money into an investment that wasn't panning out instead of walking away? Have you ever kept plodding down a dead end because you could not admit, I shouldn't have pursued this direction in the first place? Ever been stuck in a cycle of throwing good money after bad? A non-essentialist can't break free of traps like these. An essentialist has the courage and confidence to admit his or her mistakes and uncommit, no matter the sunk costs. So in thinking about kind of applying that, trying to keep my eye on the cats now, making sure, oh, hang on, Eva's getting into something bad. Yeah, so this time Eva was trying to run off with some dyed yarn, another mini skein. Little sneak peek, next self-striping color. Want to keep that safe. Fortunately, I caught her in time. Anyway, so sunk cost bias. Okay, so for example, maybe, so I'm going to actually use some examples from my own life. So every year or so, my mom and my sister and I, we have a garage sale. And so for example, maybe I have this pair of pants in my closet that I have not worn for years. And I decide, okay, I need to get rid of these. But, and I'm just going to throw out some numbers, but I paid $50 for these pants. And sure, they're too small and I can't wear them anymore, and they've been sitting in my closet for years and they take up space. But man, I spent $50 on those. So when I mark them for the garage sale, I put $5 on them. Because I think, man, I mean, that's still quite a bit big loss, but if I can at least just get $5 on these, I'll feel a little bit better. And if you're familiar with garage sales, one of the things people do is ask, will you take less? So, someone comes up to the garage sale with the pants and says, will you take $1 for these? And I say, in my head, so I don't say this, I'm like, lady, those pants cost $50. $5 is a deal. It's a bargain. I didn't wear them very often. They're still pretty new. You should definitely pay $5 for them. I can't believe you'd offer me $1. That's kind of insulting. So all of that's going on in my head. And so I think, no, I'm sorry, they're $5. And what does she do? She puts them back because to her, they're not worth $5. They're worth $1. And at the end of the garage sale, what happens? Those pants have not sold. They are still sitting there. And now I have a choice. Do I go put them back in my closet where they're taking up space and I know that I'm never going to get back to that size. I'm not going to ever fit into them. Or do I donate them and therefore instead of $1, now I have nothing. Except, I mean, there's goodwill and donation. Not donating to Goodwill, but the goodwill that you feel in donating something. Anyway, so we're gonna kind of ignore that. We're just gonna talk about the cost. So now I've got $0 for these pants. And either they're still taking space in my closet and I still have $0, or they are gone, but I got $0 for them. Whereas I could have gotten the $1 from that woman. And $1 is better than 0, right? Why couldn't I just let go of the pants? They're not doing me any good. I did get to wear them, so maybe I didn't feel like I got $50 of wear out of them, but at least I got to wear them for a little bit. They're not doing me any good. I've already sunk the cost into them. I should give them up. But again, it's that feeling inside that you have of, I invested so much in these, I can't just give them away for practically nothing. So that's the idea behind sunk cost. So a time type of thing as well. Reading is a good example. So you're reading a book, you've gotten halfway through the book and you think, or I should say this because I think, man, I'm just not enjoying this book. I really don't like the characters. I don't care what happens to them, but I have already spent so much time reading this book. I'm halfway through. Why don't I just finish it? Might as well finish it. I've already spent all this time reading it. Why give up now and waste all that time? And so I continue on with the book, and because I'm not excited by it, it takes me forever to read it, and as a result, I've not moved on to another book that I might enjoy a lot more, when I could have just given up that book. Sure, it was wasted time in reading the first half of the book, but why waste more time? Why invest more time in a book that I'm not enjoying because I don't want to waste the time that I spent reading the first half? Again, what's going on there? So that's the sunk cost idea, that you even though you know that you shouldn't throw more time into something or more money into something, you have that feeling, but I've already invested so much into this, I can't just give it up. When really, you should just give it up. Let it go. The pants are sitting in my closet. The $50 have already been spent. It's not doing me any good to keep them. The first half of the book, I didn't get it. Occasionally, a book will turn around and get better in the second half, but that's pretty rare. Find another book. Just don't waste more time. And so I started thinking about how this also applies. Ooh, Eva's eyeing the yarn again. Okay, I have to keep an eye on her. This also applies to our crafting time. How many times have you been working on a project and you know it's not working? You maybe didn't check your gauge on a sweater and you realize the sweater is too small. Hold on, she just ran off with something else. So this time it was the cotton yarn that I used to tie off the sections of self-striping to tell me where to dye each color. Anyway, okay, so sunk cost projects. Okay. So you've been working on a project, you didn't check your gauge, it's a sweater, it's coming out way too small or way too big. You know that you need to rip it out. You know it's not working, but you just keep going anyway. I've already knit half this sweater. It's gonna be a waste of the time that I've been knitting the first half. I'm just gonna keep going, even though I know the sweater's not gonna fit in the end. Or you have a project that the yarn and the stitch pattern are just not a good match for each other. And you know you're not going to be happy with how it turns out, but you're so close to being finished, so you might as well just finish it because you've put all of that effort and time into this project so far. And so you go ahead and finish it, and you look at what you have and you think, this is just going to sit in my closet, or maybe I'll give it away because I don't want this. It's not something that that I'm finding useful. So why do we do that to ourselves? Why do we not admit this is not working and I need to rip it out and start over? Either find a new project for this yarn or figure out, hey, this is actually my gauge, and so I need to either knit a different size or I need to use a different size needle and get a different gauge. Why do we have such a hard time doing that? Maybe you don't. Maybe you're not kind of prey to this sunk cost bias, but I think a lot of us are. Or you admit that the project's not working, and so you don't continue on it, but you don't frog it either, and you just put it aside, and it takes up space, and you have all these works in progress, and you're not doing anything with them. So it's hard. I know. I do it too. Or maybe you've got yarn in your stash that you spent money on, and maybe it was pretty expensive yarn. Maybe it was decently priced yarn, but you maybe liked it when you bought it, but now it's been a couple of years and you're not so into that yarn anymore. But you spent, let's say $35 on this skein of yarn. It's this hand-dyed, really highly variegated yarn, and you think, what the heck am I going to do with it? But I spent so much on it, I have to find something for it. And so you keep it, and you keep looking at it, and you feel guilt that you have not been using it. Or maybe you spend a lot of time trying to find a project for it. Maybe you need to just let go of that yarn. Yeah, I know. You spent money on it. It is hard. And I know that, just spending money on yarn and then giving it away and not getting that money back. I know that is something that is really important. But at a certain point, you have to decide, now my stash is half full of yarn that I know I really don't love, that I know I really don't want to use. And so it's taking up all this space, and my stash seems a lot bigger than it really is. And so I feel like I can't go buy new yarn because my stash is so big, even though half of my stash is yarn that I really don't want to use. So we get into those patterns where we don't want to admit that that the thing that we've spent the time or the money on is not worthwhile anymore. So I guess this just kind of reading the book and reading over that, again, this idea is not new. I've run across it before, but for whatever reason, reading it now in this book really made me start thinking about how we apply that to our crafting lives. And maybe we should kind of think about that and realize that there is this bias, this sunk cost bias that's going on, and maybe admit to ourselves a little bit more that the sweater, no matter how fast you knit it, it's still not going to fit because your gauge is off, or you picked the wrong size, or no matter how much you keep hoping the variegated yarn and the super highly cabled stitch pattern just are not working together. I know it's hard to admit. It's hard to admit for me too. But maybe we need to take a little more time in admitting those things to ourselves, so that way we can spend time and spend money on the stuff that is exciting, that does matter to us. And if it helps, think of, especially of a project, don't think of it as wasted time. So let's say that you've got the highly variegated yarn and the cable stitch pattern. And the colors in the yarn are completely hiding the cables. What was the point of even doing these cables, because you can't see them at all. And you think, but oh man, it took so much effort to do all these cables. I don't want to waste all the time that I put into it. Think of it's not a waste of time. You've learned some things. You've learned cables, highly variegated yarn, not a good match. So next time you have highly variegated yarn, you're not going to pick a pattern with cables. So that's a valuable bit of information you've learned. Maybe you haven't been super experienced in cables, and now you've got a lot more experience. Now you've really been able to practice some cables. So your next cable project is going to go a lot more smoothly because you've done that. Maybe even though the yarn and the pattern don't work well together, you've still enjoyed that time knitting. I mean, most of us knit not because we need the item that we're making, but because we enjoy knitting. We enjoy that crafting time. in that process. So all the time that you've spent, even if you don't have a finished project, even if you're ripping something out, that's still time that you've enjoyed doing the crafting. So if you try to think of what you have gotten out of it rather than, man, it's just a complete waste of time, then that might also help if you're trying to decide, I know I need to rip out this project, but I just can't bear to do it. Maybe that will give you just a little extra push to be able to rip out the project, find something else to do with that yarn, or decide you don't love the yarn anymore and you need to find a new home for it. So anyway, I just thought that was really, really interesting kind of application to one of the things that I was reading in this book about essentialism. Reminder about this quarter's knit along or crochet along. The theme is any shawl that you are making for yourself. So there have been more entries in the FO thread that I wanted to show you guys. So the first is, sorry, I want to actually turn this so you can see it, but my Kindle's gonna, or my iPad's gonna go flip it. This is the Wonder Woman shawl, and it was knit by Dragon Fairies. And this is actually some of my yarn. This is the Legend base. So I showed you the Beauty and the Beast shawl where it has that darker starting color. So I believe this is Morgan Le Fay and A Fair Lady and Passing Wise, which are kind of a bright red and blue, which still look pretty bright, but they're darker than usual because of this yarn. Anyway, so that is the Wonder Woman wrap. Then Jess Baum 712 did, and I just looked at the name of this project and now I'm not remembering it, but she did this nice shawl. You guys can go to the Ravelry group and see this really nice shawl out of this pretty yarn. So again, it's a variegated yarn, but she did a great job. There's the full project, picking something that only has a little bit of kind of patterning in the stitches, not, you know, heavily cabled or anything. So it's a good matchup between the yarn and a pattern. So that is a really pretty shawl. Then we have Miss Pickle Chips, who knit Citron. So I don't know how well you can see it in the picture. This is a really interesting pattern that's a half pie shawl that has kind of the ruffled sections in the middle. So it makes for a really nice texture, and this is also out of my yarn. This is Avalon, so a merino silk blend, and it's I know that so this Miss Pickle Chips is someone who's in my knitting group, so I actually saw this shawl in person, and it turned out to be a pretty big shawl. She wanted a big shawl, and she said it's still not quite big enough. It's a good size. And then finally, at this point, we have Elsie 99, who has knit a test knit for Lori B. Lori B is a one of the local to DFW area designers. So this is a new pattern that will be coming out that that Elsie 99 has knit for this knit along. So you can see up here the overall shape of the shawl, and then this nice stitch pattern on the shawl there. So you guys, you've done some really fantastic projects this quarter, and the quarter's not done. You have until the end of March, and according to the chat thread, there are definitely still some projects that will be going into the FO thread that I will share with you guys next time. And quite a few people will be entered to win the prize, which is this pretty shawl pin. I showed you guys last, I think 2 episodes ago, so I wanted to show you again. So it's a little spiral pin that looks like it has little cat ears, and it comes from Knitting Lanyep, and it's really pretty. So that is the prize. Someone who has posted in the FO thread will, between now and the end of March, will win. So I'm so excited to see what you guys, and I really love that these are all shawls that you've made for yourself. You guys are going to be sporting some really fantastic shawls around town And a lot of you, I know, will be going to DFW Fiber Fest, so I hope to see some of these shawls in person as well. So, again, please come over to the Ravelry group. There's a chat thread and then the FO thread. It is not too late to jump into this knit along. You still have over a month, which should be enough time. Unless you're like me with that Beauty and the Beast shawl, it should be enough time to finish a project for this knit along. So that should do it for this episode. Thanks so much for watching. I have no idea if in the background you've been hearing the rain. It has been pouring, it has stopped, it has been light. Just over this past hour of recording, it has definitely changed quite a bit. So crazy rain the past few days. Anyway, if you are a new viewer, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. I hope you will come back and watch again. I record every other Thursday. For those of you who are returning viewers, thanks for coming back and spending this time with me. I hope that you will go over to the Ravelry group, excuse me, over to the Ravelry group on for the podcast. There is a discussion thread for each episode, so go over to this episode's discussion thread. I'd love to hear what you have to say, especially about that sunk cost bias that I talked about, but definitely anything that I've mentioned in this episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and until next time, happy knitting!